Today's video is part 2 of our FPV budget cinematic build. Now what we're going to be covering today is the software, everything that has to do with software, from Betaflight to creating the model to doing the channels, just about everything you need in order for you just to take it outside, click arm and start flying. However, the PID tuning will come in part 3 along with the flight footage, but right now we're in part 2. I want to keep them short yet full of information, and you can skip to wherever you need to go in order to get you going. So with that being said, we're going to first start off with the receiver part, everything that has to do with the binding, the Betaflight, and also the controller setup. Then we're going to move on to the other Betaflight settings, and we're also going to be covering the motor rotation, because the motor rotation is possibly what loses a lot of people most, other than the binding process and also the setting up the receiver process. So let's go ahead and start out with our receiver here. So the first thing we want to do is you want to grab your RC transmitter. Let's just say it's an FRSky. Now all FRSky transmitters are basically the same menu. The difference is the way you interface with that menu, whether it be a joystick, whether it be different buttons. So they're all basically identical. They have pages for each thing and they will work exactly identical. So all you got to do is just know which button to press to get on that page, and they're basically identical, so you can go ahead and follow along with this. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a model on our RC transmitter, and we're going to go into menu, and we're going to go into the model select section or page, and you'll find a huge list of this. Yours might be different. This is just all the models I have. So we're going to set it on model 10 for me. It doesn't matter where you do it, just as long as you do it on the empty one. I'm just going to hit create model. Now, if you're greeted with this, just go ahead and press exit. That's what I always do. Don't let that disturb you or just confuse you. So now, as you can tell, we have a star next to our model, and that means we have this model selected, which is the one that we just recently created. Now, I'm going to click the page, which is going to go to the next section, which is the setup section. And we can go ahead and name our model. This is very useful, especially if you're going to be getting a lot of quadcopters in the future. So it's a really good habit to always just name them. So right now I'm just going to call it AA just for the sake of this tutorial, just so it can be quick. Once you're finished, just press exit and you'll be able to scroll down the list here. Then the second most important part is we need to stay on the setup page, and we want to go all the way down to the bind section here. So right now for mine, I have the internal RF set to access, but what we need is the access D16 because I'm using an older XM Plus radio, which has just basically D16. So this is what I'm going to be using, and this is more likely going to be the use case for a lot of people out there. And if it doesn't work, just change to the access and you should be good to go into that perspective. So I'll have a detailed video just on this in upcoming days where I do a bunch of FRSky tutorials. But however, the access D16 should get everyone going here. So next we want to find the bind. However, don't click bind just yet. We're just going to move this to the side now, and we're going to bring in our quadcopter. Now there's something very important you should do before you start the binding process, and what that is plug in a USB without a battery first, and also make sure your propellers are off. This whole time the propellers are off because these things could chop you up and really destroy you, even kill you. So you got to be very, very careful here. So what we want to do is we want to plug in a USB and see if our receiver's LEDs are going to light up. So I'm going to quickly just off camera remove the top plate here so we can get a better look. So now I've gone ahead and removed the top plate. Now be careful, because sometimes you might have some things stuck to the top plate and you might have to keep it next to your quadcopter, but make sure none of the carbon, especially the sides, touch any of the wires or the copper plates or just basically any board or wire. Just make sure it's really far away. However, for my case right now, this is going to be far away. Now, the next thing I want to do for my build here is I want to remove the video transmitter, put it off to the side, also make sure it's not touching anything, and we have our receiver right here. So the first step, just to know if we're able to make things a little bit easier here, is to plug in the USB. And the reason why we do that is to see if our receiver is going to power up, because if it does, then it makes our life so much easier when we are going to be binding it, which you'll get to see in a bit here. So right now I'm going to plug in the USB. Now, as you can tell, once I've connected it, the receiver does not boot up. There's no LEDs blinking, nothing. So we're going to have to use battery power here. So we can go ahead and disconnect the USB now. And I'm going to go ahead and grab myself a battery to begin the binding process. So now what I'm going to do, before I click the bind, usually all these receiver has some sort of a bind button. What I want to do first is make sure my controller is off. And I want to plug it in. Again, make sure there's no propellers on board. And I want to plug this again. And I want to see the LED status of the receiver to know what it means when I'm not connected. So as we know, blinking red this slow means it's not connected. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and remove this. And I'm just going to wait a little bit for the capacitor to release some of its power. And I want to hold the bind button here. This can be kind of tricky at times, so it's really good to try to have your receiver set into a nice place where you'll be able to easily put a battery in at the same time. Press the bind button. So now we can tell that we are in a different mode because it's the green and the red LEDs are currently on right now. So that means there's something different. So I'm pretty sure now we're in bind mode, and this is a nice way to know if you're in bind mode or not. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and grab our controller. So I'm going to move this off to the side. You might hear some sounds in the microphone from the transmitter, and I do apologize for that. Sometimes it does do that. So right now what I'm going to do, again, we internal RF access D16, and we're about to press bind. However, if you do press bind and it's still in that same whatever LED configuration it's doing right now, then you might want to change the mode to maybe access or whatever else it might be. But I know for a fact mine's on access D16. Again, we'll cover this in a later video in more in depth here. So right now we still have both LEDs on, the green and the red, without blinking. And I'm going to click bind. Let's see what's going to happen here. Sometimes it won't bind if the controller also is very close to it. There we go. We can see now something happened here. So I'm pretty sure now this thing has been bound. Next thing you want to do is you want to press exit. And now that sound should be gone if yours has a sound or not. But you should just press exit and just goes back to the main menu here. We're going to come back here and we are going to disconnect the quadcopter. Give it a bit and we're just going to connect it again. And now we can see we have a green LED because I still have my controller on. So that means we're bound. I'm pretty sure we're bound because we saw that when nothing was connected, it was flashing red very slowly. When it's in bind mode, both green and LED were solid. And now we have a solid green light. It's like it's flashing really fast, but we can consider it a solid green light. So now we know we're in fact that we are currently bound here. So let's go ahead and just disconnect this for a bit. The next step, what we have to do is we have to plug in the USB. You don't need to plug in the battery if your receiver boots up just by USB alone. Some flight controllers do that. For example, ours currently doesn't do that. So we're going to have to plug in the USB and also plug in the power here in order for us to give power to the receiver and make sure we're going to set it up correctly. So now we can move our quadcopter to the side because all we need is the transmitter and also Betaflight. So once it's connected, we're going to want to go into COM, whatever COM yours might be. So mine's COM 15 here, and I'm going to click connect. Now the next thing we want to go to is we want to go to the ports tab. Now you want to find serial RX. Serial RX means the receiver connection. And as we can tell, the receiver connection is on UART1. Now, when we connected this, we followed the instructions, which said the RC input was on RX1 or whatever. So this by default should be the correct one. And to know if it's correct, we're going to have to go down to the receivers tab. Obviously, make sure it's bound and connected. And when you move these around, they should start moving just like that. So that's really nice here. So I'll just zoom out a little bit so you can see better. So you can see I'm moving my throttle and the throttle is moving. However, for example, you're moving your throttle and you find that your throttle is not moving and something else is moving, because usually it comes like this, depending on your transmitter. So right now, look, I'm going to move throttle and it's actually moving the roll for me, which is wrong here. So what I'd want to go to is the spectrum right here. Spectrum, I know FR Sky seems pretty obvious, but not always it works. It depends on the firmware you have. So TAER is the channel map here. And now if I move my throttle, the throttle moves. And if I move my yaw, the yaw moves. And also if I move my pitch, you can see the pitch and the roll. So everything here now looks good. Now don't forget to save always. So once you change the channel map, save it so you can actually see it reflect into here. So like this, we have our receiver perfectly working. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want the modes, which is arming and angle and all these things. So I'm going to go ahead and remove everything here. All right, so now I've removed everything that came in modes and I clicked save because I want it to be clean. As you can tell, we have nothing set up here. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the receivers tab because I think this would be the most easiest way to understand it. So we need to set up auxiliary 1, for example, to be for arming, auxiliary 2 to be for choosing if you're in angle or acro mode. 3 would be the beeper, and 4 would be flip over after death, for example. But the main ones are 1 and 2 here. So how would we go about setting this up? This is where it loses a lot of people. So as you can tell, when we move any of the switches, nothing is happening. And you should see something happen here, but nothing is really happening no matter what we do here. So let's put them back into the default positions. And we want to go into the menu again. So we're going to go ahead and click menu. I'm going to zoom in right here for you. And we're going to go to page. Make sure, again, your correct model is selected. So we're on setup right now. We want to click page. Again, again, until we get into the mixer. Now, inputs might be the common sense or something, you know, like when I first started, I was like, oh, it should be on input, but why nothing is happening? No, it should be on mixer. It's the page right after it. So we're going to go to channel 5 here, and we're going to click on it. Once we click on it, we want to go to source right there. And now, before we click on source, make sure which one you want. So this is going to be the first one, which is going to be auxiliary 1 right here. So that's going to be our first input. So we're going to click on source, and you should see it blink. Then flip any switch that you want the arming to be, for example, because that's how we're going to set it. So I want it to be this one right here. And as you can tell, in the menu here, it switched to SD. It's still blinking though. And we could also see in Betaflight that auxiliary 1 now became this switch right here. Really nice. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to press exit twice because you exit out of the source, and then you exit again, and then again, and we're back on this screen again. So we're going to do the same concept. Now we're going to go to channel 6. We're going to click on it, go to source, and I'm going to want this to be my, for example, my mode switch. So it's going to be this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this, and you can immediately see on Betaflight also that auxiliary 2 is now activated on that switch. I'm going to press exit, exit, and then exit again. And then I'm going to set up 2 more right here. So 3 is going to be my buzzer, which is a momentary right here. Okay, so this is going to be auxiliary 3 here. And we just had a little failsafe because the thing got way too close to it. So there we go. So this is my buzzer here. And then I exit, exit, exit. And I'm going to do just one more, which is going to be this one here, which I like to be for flip over after that. Now with the remote, I'm basically done. I don't have to do anything else here except to double check. So now we're going to go into modes and set these up accordingly. So we go into the modes, and then we go to arm, add range. You could keep it to auto here. You can keep it to auto and flick the switch that you want it to arm. So boom. And as you can tell right here, immediately switched it to auxiliary 1. So that's really useful. And the way you want this to be set up is all the way to the right. So you want it, when you boot it up, this is the default position of off. And then once you want arm, you just flick it into the other position, and that arms it right here. And never forget to save. So we'll save the first one. Next, we have angle mode. So we're going to do add range, not add link. We're going to add range. Let's keep it to auto. And I said I wanted it to be this one right here. Boom. And you can see immediately switch it to auxiliary 2. And I'm going to go ahead and keep this as default. When it boots up, I like it to be in angle mode just in case. And also when I have a fly or a bug around me, I stick it back into angle mode, and then I clear that bug and I punch the throttle so I don't crash the quadcopter basically. This is what I like to do here. So this is how I set mine up. Horizon, you got to be careful with horizon because horizon will allow you to completely flip all the way over. Angle mode will keep you bricked, won't allow you to flip more than a specific amount of degrees, which I like, especially when I'm not looking at the quadcopter if I'm trying to do something or some animal or some bug just came around me. So this is very useful here. Next, we're going to go to the buzzer. So right now, to be honest, I actually forgot what was auxiliary 3 and 4, and this is why the auto is really going to help us out here. So flip over after death, I'm going to keep it auto, and we said I wanted it to be this one right here, and as you can tell, it was auxiliary 4 actually, and I'm going to set that all the way there. So by default, it's off, and then once I want it, I could just quickly activate it. And here, I wanted angle mode on by default, so that's why I set that up there. Next, we're going to go for the buzzer if you have a buzzer, and let's find the buzzer here, or beeper, sorry. So we're going to do, again, add range, auto, and I said it was this one here, and it changed automatically to auxiliary 3, and I want to make sure that it's off by default, and when I click it, it goes on. As you can tell, that's what we have here, and we also have our save in the right bottom corner right there. So like this, basically our controller is 100% ready, and I'm just double checking the yaw and roll in the receivers tab again right here. So everything looks good. We can also see my switches now working beautifully, which is really great. Now, since we're done with the controller here, we could completely just turn it off and move it off to the side, and we could begin doing the other things. Now, the next step is going to be the video transmitter smart audio. Now, if you remember in the build video, I said TX3 and get a piece of paper and write that down. So TX3 is for smart audio here, which will allow us to control the video transmitter's channels without coming here and trying to press the button on the device, which is really useful. So we're going to go to the ports tab, and we're going to find TX3, which is UART3, so which is right here, and we want to go make sure everything is disabled, disabled, and peripherals here is going to be switched to TBS Smart Audio. Now, if your transmitter has IRC Tramp, this is where you would do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the TBS Smart Audio, and I'm going to just save and reboot. Next, I want to go ahead and connect back. Now, as you can tell, I've also removed the battery because there's no need for the battery to be in the quadcopter anymore. So the next thing I like to do is I like to go to the configuration, make sure your ESC protocol is set correctly. Just leave it on D-Shot 600. If you know your quadcopter can do D-Shot 1200, you could set it there, but it's basically useless also. So I just stick it to D-Shot 600 right now. Motor stop. If you want the motors to just not spin when it's armed, then you'd want to set it up like this. If you want them to spin at a very low throttle, then you want to disable it. Everybody usually keeps the motors spinning so you know when it's armed. And these are the alignments, which I've done a separate video on this. You don't have to deal with this if you've installed it the exact correct way where the arrow is pointing forward. This is where you'd want to modify everything to work here. Next over, the gyro and PID loop. Start off with 8K, 2K. It's going to be fine in the beginning. And later on, I might go into advanced into this later on. But right now, we're just going to stick to 8K, 2K, which comes by default. Here, you could name your quadcopter Real Steady, because this is going to be my Real Steady platform for tutorials. And you don't need to do anything here. Now, and again, there's something also very important I forgot to mention, which is if you are using iBus, then you're going to want to go, and also this is very important, not all flight controllers have this already enabled. In the configurations tab, if you're still not getting anything, you need to make sure serial-based receivers are actually set up, and also SBus, because FrSky is SBus. Now, if you had a FlySky, which would be iBus, this is what you'd have to have selected in order to actually see the stuff being transmitted on the receiver. So if everything is bound and you got the port correct, but you're still not seeing anything, then you need to go into the configuration and make sure serial-based receiver is set up, and SBus or iBus depending on what you're using. This is a very important step. I forgot to say that because most of them really have it just prepared for you nowadays, most of the flight controllers. Now here, usually you don't need to do much here. We could turn off the LED strip here because I don't think we have any LEDs on this. Air mode is very important to keep on. What that allows you to do is if you drop the throttle, wind can't play with it and it'll keep it in its exact position. So it allows the motors to correct itself. So it's really useful to keep on. On-screen display is very important. That gives you your battery voltage and how many minutes you've been flying and whatever you might have on, which we're going to take a look at in a bit here. And just turn on anti-gravity dynamic filter. We're going to cover those in the next video when we take it out flying. So right now, once everything looks good, we could save and reboot here. Alright guys, now for the last part, we're going to check the motors. So first of all, we're going to check the motors, then we're going to fix them accordingly. Now there's two ways to fix them, which is either resoldering and or just through the BL Heli software. So first of all, before we get into the motors, make sure it's pointing away from you and no propellers are on. Again, this is very important that you don't have propellers in this whole process of the setup here. So we're going to plug in the USB while it's facing away from us. And this is a very important step because I'll show you why right now. So once it's plugged in, we're going to go ahead and connect. And we want to take a look at the first page that opens, which is this one. And we just lift up the front and we can see that the arrow is pointing forward. And whatever we do that same virtual quadcopter is doing exactly, that's just to double check that we got the orientation of the flight controller correct. Because next we're going to jump into the motors. So now we're going to go into the motors tab. And what's really nice here is that we can see each motor and which way it's supposed to spin. So you can see motor 1, 2, 3, 4. So first thing you want to do, obviously, again, make sure your propellers are off and then bring in a battery because these will not spin if you do not have a battery connected. Okay, that's good. All right, no fire, no nothing, which is something you always want to see here. All right, so we have that plugged in now. So we want to go ahead and click I understand the risk right here. So after you click on I understand the risk, what we want to make sure is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in exactly the same orientation right here. So motor 1 is this one, motor 2 is that one, motor 3 is this one, motor 4 is that one. So if we go to 1 here, then this one should spin. And we can again go back to that picture up there. So yep, that's the one that's spinning. We're going to do motor 2. So that's the one that's spinning, correct. Motor 3, as you can tell. Motor 3 right here, which should be this one right there. So we're going to do that. That's correct. And then motor 4, that's spinning. Perfect. Now all of them are spinning. Now we need to make sure they're spinning in the right direction. So we've confirmed that the motor numbering is correct. Now the next thing we want to do is make sure we get it in the correct orientation, or spinning in the correct direction, I should say. So we're going to click on the master here, and I'm just going to go ahead and press the arrow key up until I get them all spinning pretty slowly. Just like that is fine. So I'm going to start with motor 1. Motor 1, as you can tell, it's supposed to be spinning that way. So if I put my hand right here on the nut, it's moving it exactly the same way as the picture. So motor 1 is correct. Motor 2 should be spinning this way, but when I put my hand, it's actually spinning incorrectly. So what I recommend you do is you grab a piece of paper, just like that, and we're going to say motor 2 is going to need replacement. Maybe it's difficult to see, but I just wrote a number 2 here. And we're going to drop that. Oh, we don't need to drop that down. Now we're going to check motor 3, which should be spinning this way. And when I put my hand, it's spinning the incorrect way. So it's spinning that way right now, and it should be spinning counterclockwise. So we have motor 3, which needs to be modified. And we're going to double check motor 4. Oh, wow. Also, motor 4 is spinning in the wrong direction here. It's supposed to be spinning that way, clockwise, but it's spinning counterclockwise. So now we could go ahead and grab the master, drop it all the way down, disconnect, and we're going to remove the battery here. So there's 2 ways to actually solve this issue with motor 2, 3, and 4, which we wrote right here. And one way is to just take any 2 wires. So for example, motor 2, which was this one, was incorrect. So we could take any of the 3 wires here, just take 2 of them, and then flip them, any 2. And then that will get it to spin in the correct direction. This is the soldering method. However, the other method would be either through the BL-Heli software or the BL-Heli32 software. So right now, this is a BL-Heli32 ESC. So I'll have the link to the software down below. And right now, we're going to go ahead and cover how to actually reverse the spinning of each motor. So once you use the link down below to download it, you're going to get a file that looks like this. Just go ahead and uncompress it. So I'm just going to say extract files. And we're going to extract the files here, and we get our software. However, before starting the software, it's very important to know that if it's a BL-Heli32 ESC. So right now we know for a fact this is a BL-Heli32 ESC. The next thing we want to make sure we do is disconnect the Betaflight, or else it won't connect. Also, just close it just to be sure. And at the same time, also disconnect the USB. Make sure nothing is connected, because sometimes it won't allow you to connect because it didn't disconnect properly. So we're going to open the BL-Heli32 software here. And the thing is with the BL-Heli32 software, again, make sure your propellers are not connected. And we're also going to need to give it power via battery. So right now we got disconnected. And we could take a look down here, COM port. So just make sure you remember the COM port that you had. So now we have applied power here. So the next thing we want to do is make sure, again, the COM port is correct. Remember, it was COM15 on Betaflight. Now I'm going to go ahead and click connect here. And hopefully it should read all the ESCs. Oh, then we have to click read. And now it read everything. Really nice. Awesome. So we said on the piece of paper that we need to reverse motor 2, 3, and 4. So what we can do is we could right click, not left click like usually, right click right on motor 2. So we could just select only motor 2. And if we find motor direction, we can say reversed. And then we could say right setup, not flash, flash is update. So ESC2 has been written. Next, we're going to go down here. We're going to right click on ESC3 because we also wrote ESC3 needs to be reversed. We're going to click reverse, right setup. Okay. And the last is 4. And we're going to go reversed, right setup. And now what we can do is do another read setup just to double check everything. So it is reversed. And we'll read setup. Looks good. And we'll read setup. Looks good. Okay, now make sure you disconnect. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect here. Sometimes when you disconnect for some reason, Betaflight won't let you connect. I don't know why, but just for some reason, sometimes Betaflight doesn't really let you connect here. So we're just going to push this off to the side, and we're going to double check if these are actually working. So there we go. We have our motors. We're going to go ahead and click this, and we're going to go to the master again. And we're going to have them just click a couple times the arrow key up. Now they're all spinning here. So now we can go ahead and double check this. So we have motor 1. Again, it was spinning correct in the beginning. So it was supposed to be spinning that way. Motor 2 is supposed to be spinning that way and that's spinning correctly. Motor 3 is spinning this way, or it should be spinning this way, and it is spinning in the correct direction. And the last one is also correct now. So now like this, we've completed the complete setup of a quadcopter. However, if you had BL-Heli-S, you just download the BL-Heli-S software and it works exactly the same way. There's nothing else to it. You just follow the same exact concepts, and even the program, the software looks exactly identical here. And now this guy is completely ready. and just wait for part 3 when we do the flight and also the beta flight setup or the PID tuning setup. And again, everything here is linked down below. I've gone ahead and fixed most of the links. Also, I've added the 3D printed parts, so make sure you check those out. And come support me on Patreon. You get awesome giveaways. I do more than 10 giveaways, premium giveaways. I usually give this stuff out for free. And also new Patreons. For example, I got 2 new Patreons this month. Then there'll be a separate premium giveaway just between those 2. So I do a lot of giveaways. You also get access to my secret shop where some of the things I've gotten for review that I'm not going to be using, I would sell it for like 20-30% off, 50% off most of the time, just to kind of keep supporting the channel. So you get a lot of benefits and also access to my open hardware schematics, such as the open hardware flight control and everything of that nature. And again, everything's linked down below. Make sure you click those links, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace out.